Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Dr. KAJ McIntyre. She is the founder and CEO of the Joyful Leadership Academy, and where she works with leaders and organizations to embed joyful values-led leadership in practice. So we learn from her what joyful leadership looks like in practice, how to balance results with humanity, and why joy might be the most overlooked factor in building cultures that thrive. Welcome to the show, Dr. Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Dr. Katie. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about leadership, we'll talk about culture, and we'll talk about the power of joy. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm Dr. KAJ McIntyre. I'm the CEO and founder of the Joyful Leadership Academy. I started the academy after seeing the impact that leaders were having in so many ways. I've been in leadership roles for over 20 years, working with in education, in nonprofits, and I was really seeing the impact that leaders were having in a really positive and sometimes not so positive way. So my background is I was chief operating officer of an aeromedical airline. I was a school principal. And again, across all of these contexts, leaders have such a huge impact. And so seeing the impact that leaders have, I started to kind of consider the ways that leaders were able to lead in more positive ways, in ways that had a positive impact. And around about the time I was in these leadership roles, I got an email from a colleague, and this email simply said, "Oh, it looks like this is your thing." And the email I opened up the email, and it was a Harvard Business Review article, and it said people are looking for joy in the workplace. And unfortunately, it said they're not finding it. There was kind of this missing element of joy. And so that really sparked me to embark on this journey around joyful leadership, to do my PhD and really study the role of joy in the leadership journey. And then, of course, start the Joyful Leadership Academy.
Absolutely, Dr. Katie. So when you talk about joy in leadership, who is this joy should be? It should be for the leaders, or it should be for the employees? How should one understand it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think it's at all levels. For me, it's joy at that leadership level in the role of the leader and what they're experiencing, but also in terms of the employees and those who are their followers as well. I think it's really crucial to consider the impact. And what we know is that emotions in humans are very contagious, and so when the leader's experiencing joy, then the employees, the followers, have that experience too. And I think it's really important to consider joy in leadership and the kind of leadership role that is impacted by joy and can experience joy is not necessarily just a title or a nominated role. I mean, many of us take leadership roles within our communities, within our families, within our workplaces. And so for me, leadership is that idea of working together to have people aligned in a common direction, a common purpose, to achieve the outcomes, and doing that with a sense of joy, both for the leader and for those who are followers in that situation.
Right. So aren't leaders joyful? They enjoy everything. They have got the corner office. They have got good bank balance. They have got good pays. You see the leadership pays everywhere in the world. And many of them just laugh their way to the bank. Isn't that joyful enough? What other joy should they think about? And why should they think of anyone else? Whether leadership is in crisis, whether great resignation is happening, or even quiet quitting is happening, who cares? I will laugh my way to the bank. I am the leader. I will do as I want.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, Leadership is really challenging at this point in time. The speed of change is escalating so quickly. We are seeing things happen in organizations where we're seeing trends where, there is quiet quitting. There is, people leaving organizations. Retention is a challenge. And so leaders are certainly having to deal with all of these things. And yes, there are some benefits that can be seen in the leadership role. But at the same time, there's always this tension that leaders are facing between how do they achieve the outcomes for their organizations while ensuring the well-being of their people, of their staff, of their employees. So I think that the leadership role is really complex. I think that it's there's certainly many challenges, and I think having the opportunity to experience joy in that role will lead leaders to feel more purposeful, more connected, a greater sense of warmth and lightheartedness in the role, but also that will have a flow-on effect to their employees and to their customers and to those that they're serving and working with. The effect on their community. So there's this kind of emotional contagion that happens with joy where it actually spreads beyond just the individual. And I think you make such a good point there around this is not just about, there's a difference, I think, between this idea of being, cheerful or gleeful or even happy to a certain extent, and this feeling of joy. And often we see when people experience joy, there's a real sense of purpose. There's a real sense of connection to others, connection to humanity. They feel very connected to the reason they're doing the job in the first place. And so I think it's not just about being cheerful. It's not just being about positive, about being positive all the time. It's actually having a sense of purpose and a sense of connection that's greater than oneself. So, and the rewards of that are significant, but of course, very complex and not always easy to achieve.
Absolutely, Dr. Katie. I don't know about who your clients are, but I can tell you your job is not easy, because how do you inject joy in different variant of leadership, either fossilized leadership or the leadership who has lost empathy? Or do you
Yeah.
think, you will have to talk to leadership of a new generation that is coming up and a new generation of leaders? We have to look at the future. The present is too broken to be fixed. How do you look at all these different trends and scenarios with all the things happening? Till few months back, people were talking of imposter syndrome. Thank God that is gone there, and I'm sure it is a real problem. But so many were just talking about it, and so in that sense, where do you get to inject this joy thing? Means, isn't it something that comes inherently? You are happy about being in that place for which you studied, went to management schools, did so many courses, applied for that job, and still you are not happy? How will you be able to tell your employees to be happy in whatever roles they are?
Mhm. It's such a great question, and can I say thank you for acknowledging that it is a tough gig. It is tough to be a leader, but it's tough to be in times where you have to support those leaders through some really challenging and complex things. I do have to say I love my job. I have the privilege of working with extraordinary leaders who are doing amazing things. But I think in terms of how we kind of look at building that joy and increasing that joy, it is certainly something that we can learn, develop, grow. There is no doubt. And in actual fact, it's the first thing I want to say really is it's beyond just this one big event or this one kind of idea. It's not created through a single initiative or a program. What it is, it's actually shaped through how the leaders show up every day. And that kind of sounds a little bit simple, but it's not really, because it's actually hard to do. So I tend to come back to things like clarity. So clarity around purpose. People feel positive. They feel energized when they have a sense of clarity and purpose. Another really big one when it comes to joyful leadership is that sense of presence, like really simple things like before you meet with a person or have an important meeting, actually taking a moment to reflect on what is it that this person really needs from me right now, and how do I want them to feel when they walk away from this conversation. So being really present in the space, things like that change a culture. Gratitude, for example, demonstrating, modeling gratitude for particular events or particular things that might support that idea of joy throughout the day can actually have a really big impact. So for me, it's about the steps that the leader is taking each day, the culture that they're creating, rather than kind of one big event or one big initiative or one, kind of major event is kind of where I'd say leaders can start to kind of build joy, and coming back to that joy as a practice every day that they can return to and they can model for the people around them. And the more the leader feels that joy, emotional contagion says to us, the more their followers will feel joy, and it builds that culture over time.
Absolutely. So, how does it work? How you talk about that joy is often misunderstood or overlooked, and it plays a powerful role in how people experience work, make decisions, and lead others. Help us understand how should businesses understand this, especially small businesses who are scaling and will come to a level when they will have to think about, very good workplaces in the coming days.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that it's really important to understand where you're starting from. Every organization, every leader is starting from a different place, and I think that's one of the really important things to begin with. A big part of my PhD was actually to develop a scale where we could measure joyful leadership, and we've been able to use that scale through future research to actually look at how it impacts employee outcomes. And so we know from that it actually positively impacts employee well-being, it positively impacts employee engagement. So for the first thing I'd say is really knowing where to start, where your organization is situated, where you as a leader are situated, and think about what next steps you might take in terms of developing the culture around joy, that leadership style. And I think that's really important, because knowing where you're starting from, knowing where you're coming from, knowing where that beginning point is, you can actually determine the steps to get to where you want to be, and you can also see when you've got there. I'm not sure any of us ever get to this point where we can say, we're fully done with the journey towards joyful leadership. But I'd love to hear from anybody who has had that experience and who is there. That'd be a wonderful thing to see. But certainly, I think we're all on this journey to find more joy in our workplaces, in our roles, in our context. And I think the journey's an ongoing one.
Right, Dr. Katie. How do you start implementing such a noble thing into the workplace, but which employees also understand in the right way? Do not understand that now things are very much relaxed, and we can relax and forget about performance. How do you bring joy, but at the same time do not forget the performance part of it?
Oh, it's such an important one. I think the first place to start is actually understanding and acknowledging that they're not mutually exclusive. Actually, what we know now is having more joy, um, demonstrating that joyful leadership actually has a positive impact. And so not only are they not mutually exclusive, but having one will actually lead to greater performance and support the organization in terms of greater performance. For example, we know that retention of staff is really significant in terms of not only in terms of the cost of losing staff and retraining and recruiting and all of those type of things, but also in terms of the lost knowledge and the changes that we see when we have staff leaving and new staff entering. And so, there could be a lot of benefits that you can actually demonstrate to your staff to give them the sense that this is something that could not only benefit our well-being, but also benefit our performance. And I think then making it really clear that this is the vision of the organization. This is the way that we want the organization to operate, and is in a way that is cultivating this practice of joy, and then setting us a clear set of goals or intentions around what the actual actions are to develop. Like I said, it might be as simple as starting a gratitude kind of practice for the organization, or it might be starting to incorporate some more inclusive practices within the organization, that so that people feel very included and people aren't feeling excluded, which is very much an important part of joyful leadership. So identifying what the next steps are is really important, and also having clarity with the organization, with the staff, with your community about what the intention of the organization is to do to cultivate more joy.
Right. Which organizations suffer from lack of joy? Is it the big organizations, mid-sized organizations, or the startups? Dr. Katie, what is your experience?
To be honest, I have seen joy flourishing and joyful leadership flourishing in organizations of all different sizes. And similarly, I've seen organizations of all different sizes really struggling to cultivate that joy. You see it when there's a loss of clarity or a loss of sense of purpose. And I think there is no size organization that is immune to it. I think we know that larger organizations are sometimes harder to change, and they may take longer to change and implement these practices related to joyful leadership. But at the same time, they also sometimes have greater resources as well. So it can be something large, small, even micro organizations are struggling with, but certainly any size organization can also develop and learn and grow and establish more joyful leadership within their organization.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dr. Katie. So when and how do you come into this whole picture? Do you go to organizations and tell them, listen, you must bring joy to your organization and I will help you? Or they come to you and tell Dr. Katie, I want to bring joy in my organization. I'm happy, but everything else there is no joy in my life. How does it work?
I'm not sure it'd be so joyful if I went and told people what to do and told them they need to be more joyful, would it? But no, the way it works is I'm approached by organizations who they really want to take a look at what's going on in terms of their leadership. We might start by doing perhaps a bit of an audit around what's currently happening, where their staff are sitting, where their leadership practices are currently sitting. And then what we'll do is we'll actually identify where that organization wants to go. So it's very specific to each organization, and so are the solutions. So we might see that particular organization wants to do a whole staff kind of training, or maybe there's something a bit more kind of focused on a leadership group, or maybe there's something a really specific area. One of the areas I really work in is working with organizations who are working in some of those more challenging areas. And so maybe it's actually dealing with some challenging situations and how that might deal with that effectively. So really the idea is an organization will approach me, we'll kind of say, I want to lead, and we want to build this culture within our organization. We want to have a stronger, more joyful culture. And then we'll actually have a conversation about what the best approach is for them. And then through that process, again, there might be different training options, different kind of resources they need. And then we'll have a way of reflecting on that at the end and kind of looking at the journey and how far we've traveled, which is always a wonderful place to be able to look and see, just how far organizations have come. But no, certainly they approach me, and we kind of work out from there what their needs might be and how best to work with them.
Absolutely. So, are they listening a bit more nowadays? How is the trend? Do you think, they know that it is, even if we don't change our heart, the times are changing and we will become defunct if we don't listen. And are they really listening, especially when a lot of them are accused of being non-empathetic in these times? Tell us about that fact from the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. What I am so excited about at the moment is, and what I really love is that we're seeing a real shift. In the past, we've probably focused a lot more on those negative kind of outcomes and things like burnout and things like that. But now, what we know when we focus on positive emotions like joy, for example, we know that it actually has a positive impact in the long term. So, what my findings were is that joyful leadership actually builds positive emotion and enhances resilience. And so, what that means is what the employees, the leaders take that into different contexts, different challenges, and they're actually more resilient and more joyful in those particular contexts. So while in the past we've seen a lot of conversations around the negative, we want to avoid burnout, we're now seeing this really lovely shift, which I think is fantastic, around how do we cultivate more of these positive emotions. And more we're seeing leaders and organizations really getting on board with this conversation and really wanting to really support their staff. And I think there's this kind of really nice realization too. You know, in the past, it was maybe seen that you either have to support their well-being or you have to kind of get the performance. But now what we're seeing and what the research is telling us quite consistently is actually if you support well-being, actually if you create these positive cultures, actually if you do this work, it actually has a positive outcome in terms of retention, in terms of engagement, in terms of overall outcomes, you know, in terms of trust in the leader, for example, all of these different positive outcomes when you build these cultures that include these emotions like joy. So I think it's a really exciting time. And I think we're seeing more and more the research is really quite definitive that it has these positive outcomes. Even things like creativity. We know that creativity is enhanced when we create these cultures that are based around joy and positive emotions. So again, when organizations are looking to develop creative solutions, there's a real opportunity here when they've built that culture.
Absolutely, Dr. Katie. There is so much to learn about all this from you, and I'm sure a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations all across the world would want to connect with you, learn more from you about the work you are doing, also be your client. What's the best way for them to do so?
So please have a look at the joyfulleadershipacademy.com.au. Our website's on there. You can contact us through that website. Very happy to help any organization who's looking to implement some of these ideas, some of these strategies. Very happy to help. So please do reach out. It's joyfulleadershipacademy.com.au.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.